Hello everyone, welcome to this Financial Reporting in Focus webinar. My name is Isabel Rove and I'm an Education Community Manager here at ACCA. Our session today is designed to support your preparation for the Financial Reporting exam. And to help us do that, I'm very pleased to be joined by expert tutor Cara Barrett. But before I hand over to Cara, I'd just like to cover a few housekeeping items first. So at the bottom of your screen, there are a number of buttons that you can use during the session. You have a help icon, which provides resources and information that can help you resolve any technical issues you might experience during the webinar. But mainly, if you are seeing issues with the slides progressing or you can't hear us, the best thing to do is try refreshing your browser, as that normally helps fix the problem. You'll see icons for the slides and the media player, and you'll need both of those open during the webinar, so make sure you've got those selected. You can also resize the windows in your screen as well to suit your preference. We have an attendee chat function, which I'm delighted to see some of you have already got involved in. This will help you chat with your fellow webinar attendees as well. Just bear in mind that everything you post there is a public visible to everyone, so try not to share personal details such as your mobile phone or email address. But as I said, it's been lovely to see you all saying hello, and it's so nice to see you're joining from all around the world. Now, there is also a list of available resources. That icon looks like a file symbol, so if you click on this, you can access resources relevant to today's webinar, including the direct links. And also, I just point out that registering for this email means that you'll be sent registering for this webinar means you'll be sent an email tomorrow with details of how you can watch it again. So don't worry if you miss anything, or you have technical issues, you'll be able to access the recording in your own time, and you can watch that on demand. Now, if you want to ask ACCA or Cara a question during the session, then please click on the Q&A button. That's the middle icon at the bottom of your screens. We do get a lot of questions coming through in these sessions though, so we can't guarantee that we'll be able to respond to everyone, either verbally in the Q&A section at the end or via the web chat, but hopefully the questions we share will be helpful to everyone. Now, with that in mind, I am going to hand over to our expert tutor, Cara. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll see you at the end.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And hello, everybody. It's fab to see you joining from so many far and distant places, far and distant for me anyway. I've seen Mumbai, Pakistan, Nepal, Cameroon, Senegal, all sorts of places. Fantastic to see you here. Let me introduce you to me, though, first of all. My name is Cara Barrett, and I have been teaching people like yourselves to pass accountancy exams, but also teaching the tutors that teach you to pass those exams for, well, years and years now, actually, which obviously makes me very old, well over 23 years. I also do a lot of development work, writing learning materials and questions and exams and what have you. Just going to throw it out there now, though, I have absolutely not been involved in writing your exam that you will be sitting in December, so I cannot tell you what is going to be on that paper. So what are we going to cover today? Let me just move on to my next slide and you will see the agenda. So we've got about an hour together, and we're first of all going to start with some exam tips. We'll have a quick question first and then some exam tips. And then we're going to move on and concentrate on using mock exams. They're vitally important to get you through your FR paper, but also all of your other exams. Then we have some frequently asked questions, our most asked questions, and actually some of the things that you're typing in the Q&A box, you might find that I cover those off there. But then at the end, just to pick up on anything else, we do have what we'll call a live Q&A session, whereby I will pick up on some of the items. I won't be able to cover all. Isabel's already said that. We do get really busy, but I'll pick up on some of those questions that you put in the Q&A box, and I will share the answers with all of you. So I'll specifically then be really picking on the questions which I think are relevant to lots of you, rather than things which are very, very niche and maybe only of concern to one person because they're so specific. So I'll try and pick the more general ones so that we can benefit as many of you as possible. What I want to do, though, is I just want to start by throwing out a very quick poll question. Don't worry, I'm not testing you here. I just want to ask really how you're doing in terms of your preparation for your exam. So if I just click the next slide button, there you go. You have a poll question. Do you feel prepared for your upcoming FR exam? And your options are, yes, I'm absolutely ready. No, not yet, but I do have a plan. I will be ready. And then C, not yet, and actually I'm a little bit mixed up. I'm not quite sure what to do between now and the exam. So if you could go ahead and throw in your vote so I can just get a feel for where you are, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Just give you a couple of minutes. I can see that some of you have already voted. The numbers are jumping up by the second, really. It just gives me a feel of where you all are. That's just about half of you have voted now. So I'll stop the poll in a minute, but if anybody else wants to get in a last minute vote. There we go, we're over half. So let's see how we're doing. Let's go on to the next slide and see some results. There we go. So just 6% of you say, yes, I'm ready. If you're that 6%, wow, well done. If you're not in that 6%, actually, don't worry, because I wouldn't expect you to be ready yet. So I don't have massive concerns if you're not in that 6%. As I say, if you are, fantastic. Not yet, but I have a plan and I will be ready. That's brilliant. That sounds like you're on the ball. That is 66% of you. And then not yet, and I'm not sure what to do, 28% of you. And actually, that's quite a common feeling at this stage. So don't worry if you're in that 28%. Now, what I want to do over the next few minutes, the first part really of the webinar, is give you some ideas of what you could do. So those of you who say, yes, I'm ready, can check that you've done all of these things. Those of you who say, I've got a plan, I will be ready, you can check that what I suggest is in your plan. And those of you that aren't quite sure, hopefully what I'm doing is helping you formulate your plan. So that is my idea for what's upcoming. So that takes us on to our next session, which is, as you can see, called Exam Tips. But what I'm actually starting with is not in the exam tips, it's pre-exam tips. In other words, what you can do between now and your exam. So I think there are 3 key things that you need to get on top of over the next 3 or so weeks. What are they? Well, the first of those is technical content. So we know that FR has pretty big syllabus. There's quite a few IFRSs and IASs, the conceptual framework. There's quite a few bits and bobs in there. So what I'm talking about when I say get on top of the technical content is get a good feel for that syllabus. And I'm not saying you have to know it inside out down to the minutest level of detail, because I think that's completely unrealistic. Even for somebody who's going to win a prize, I think that's unrealistic. So let's get a good handle on the technical content. What else do I think you should be doing? I think you should be getting up to speed with the exam software so that when you go into your exam, you're not worrying about the software, you're thinking about that technical content, you're thinking about how to answer the questions. It's like making a meal. If you go into a kitchen that you're familiar with, you can make a meal much more easily than if you go into a kitchen you've never been in your life and you don't know where the saucepan is, you don't know where the plate is. It's that principle. So let's get up to speed on the exam software. And then the third thing, really important, you've probably heard this a lot, get up to speed on exam technique. Good exam technique can be the difference between a pass and a fail in professional exams. So let's give you some tips for that. So what I'm going to do, 3 things there. What I'm going to do is talk about all 3 of them. So I'm going to chat a little bit about technical content, how you can kind of get up to speed on that, what you need to know now. I'm going to give you a video, show you a video on exam software, just so I can go into the practice platform and show a few top tips. And then we'll come back and talk about some technique tips. But first of all, the technical content. What can I tell you here? What do I think you should be doing now? So hopefully by this stage, you've run through the syllabus, some learning materials once or almost once. And so you're at the stage of moving into this more revision phase, this more consolidating your knowledge. How can you do that? Well, I think it's a great idea to have some revision summaries. And I know that a lot of people like to actually write those revision summaries themselves because it helps things to embed in your brain. So how you do that is entirely up to you. Think about how you learn best. Do you learn best by reading, in which case maybe a page of summary notes? Do you learn best visually? I'm a visual learner, so as you can see there, I've produced a diagram. That's just my little IAS 37 revision diagram. Do you learn best by listening? In which case you could just record yourself some little audio snippets to listen back to. But at this stage, focus on the high level. As I've said, you don't need that minute level of detail to pass. Focus on the key messages. In my IAS 37 box there, it's small, you probably can't read it, but the kind of things that I've got that I would put down are things like your recognition criteria, your 3 recognition criteria, your measurement rules, things like your application, common application scenarios, just to remind a trigger of what they are, onerous contracts, things like that. That's the level you should be looking for. Once you've got those revision summaries, you'll have refreshed information in your brain, but you've also got them to look back at, and that's important as you come up to your exam. Second thing, to top up your technical content, dip into the FR part of the ACCA website and look at the technical articles. So what I've got there is just an extract. Again, it's very small, it's hard to read, but it's an extract, a screenshot from the technical articles page for FR. Now, those technical articles are written primarily by your examining team. So that is how you get an insight into the topics that interest them, how they think about them, how they might test them. So it seems silly not to use that resource. There's also what are called topic explainers there to help you understand technical topics. So you can see, well, you might not be able to see, but on that screenshot I've got there, we've got, for example, intangible assets, there's some IFRS 15, there's some financial instruments in one of the other articles. So quite a few articles, really useful. Try and find time to read those. Also on the website, have a look at examiners' reports. Examiners' reports are super useful. 2 reasons why they're super useful. Well, lots of reasons, but 2 main reasons. First of all, you do not have access to real Section A and Section B OTQ questions on the practice platform. But you do have access to some in those examiners' reports because the examiner replicates questions that students have found troublesome and talks through how to approach them. So that is a really fantastic resource. Use those Section A, Section B questions and practice them. But secondly, for Section C, the examiner walks through a good approach to the question and picks out the technical difficulties that students had. You can learn from that. And again, it helps you see inside the examiner's mind. So try and find time to read those examiner's reports, preferably after you've attempted the corresponding exam, the Section C questions on the practice platform. Third thing, Study Hub. Hopefully you've discovered it. It's got great resources on it. One of those resources, which is fab for revision, is the flashcards. And the flashcards are literally a series of cards, and then the terms are explained to you on the flip side. So you can see there, I've just pulled up one, it's contract liability. So if we clicked on that card, you'll get the definition of the contract liability. So it just gets that technical knowledge ticking. So get up to speed on your technical knowledge and start consolidating it, start revising it in effect, is tip number 1. Second thing I said that I think you need to be doing now is thinking about your exam software so you can really use it effectively and efficiently. So at this point, I am going to press play on a little video so that I can show you some top tips on the practice platform. So let's move on to that now. So let's think about tips for using the exam software to your advantage. And as you can see, I have popped into the practice platform to help with this. And this is my landing page, having selected, you can see in the top left-hand corner there, Practice Exam 1. And when you go into an exam, my first top tip is to not scroll through all of these pages of instructions, which I think is a really, really easy thing to do, to quickly whiz through them, but to actually take the time to read them. Quite apart from the fact that you are going to learn some really useful information about how to use the software to your advantage, about its functionality, that kind of thing, it's also going to help you gain confidence in using the software. So we won't read through those now, but there are a couple of things that I'm just going to point out because these are things that we get questions on an awful lot. So first of all, lots of you want to know, can I use my own calculator in the exam? And if you look there under the calculator heading, the second bullet point clarifies that that is absolutely fine as long as your own calculator cannot store or display text. The second thing we're often asked about is whether your rough workings are going to be marked. So if you just look at the heading there, workings and scratchpad, there is a facility to use a virtual scratchpad, a virtual workings facility. But the third bullet point there says that you can also have actual physical paper if you prefer to use it. In either case, though, those workings will not be seen by your marker. So just a couple of things to pull out there, but as I say, there is plenty of useful information. Please read it. In terms of actually going to the exam, if we click onto, there we are at the start of the exam, click to start it. Yes, we're ready to start it. It launches me straight into section A. So my second top tip is to use this Navigator button down here to whip your way around the exam very quickly, depending on what approach you want to take. And you need to decide on that approach. Would you like to do section A first, section B, or section C? It's a very personal choice. You can only decide what works for you best if you have a go at a couple of mock exams or a few mock exams taking different approaches. So say I have decided to do section C first, I can very, very quickly navigate here to the first question of section C and crack on with that. Still thinking about the Navigator, if I just go back to section A, the other way that it's really useful, and so another top tip, is when you are going through these OTQs, and I'm not looking at the questions at all, I'm just randomly ticking there. Let's say I think the first one's okay, the second one's a bit trickier. Yeah, I can do the third one. Not sure about that one, not sure about that one. You can work your way very quickly through OTQs, picking up the ones that you find easiest, and then at the end of that process, use your Navigator to identify what you haven't done, what you haven't attempted, and you can go straight back to those questions to have a go at them. So do the easiest questions first, using the Navigator to help facilitate that. Now, another top tip related to time management, which we know is absolutely crucial, is to use this scratch pad, which I've already mentioned, to help you monitor your time. So let's say you do decide to do section A first of all. Have a look at the clock, see what time it is. We know that it's 1.8 minutes per mark. There are 30 marks, that's 54 minutes. So just jot down the time that you will have to finish your OTQs in the scratch pad. That will not disappear as you move from question to question. See, I can bring the scratch pad up on every new question I go to, and that number, that time is still written down there. So you can really keep an eye on the timing, and that will really help you to monitor that. So even if you're not using the scratch pad for workings, think about using it just to keep that time in check. Now, if I jump to section B, just because it's a great place to show you my next top tip. In section B, obviously, we've got case studies, and of course, we have the 5 OTQs attached to what is essentially quite a chunky bit of information. So what we have here is a couple of functions which can be really useful for you, the highlight function and the strike through function. So if you feel something is particularly useful, you might want to highlight it. If you feel that something is dealt with, you don't need it anymore, you can strike it through. So those are another couple of really quite useful tools. Those, of course, are also useful in section C. If I just jump to section C, go back there, we've been there already, of course. If I go to question 31, which is obviously a question which requires the
calculations and the preparation of a financial statement, the statement of profit or loss. This is a really good place to show you how to use the functionality of an Excel spreadsheet. So let's say we're producing here a consolidated statement of profit or loss. So let's say you have drawn up a pro forma and you have cost of sales to work on. Now, it's a consolidation. We can see there's a parent and a subsidiary, and you know as well as I know that the parent and the subsidiary's cost of sale have to be included in the total cost of sales, but there might be some adjustments as well. Now, although you can use the functionality here of the spreadsheet to do your calculations, by which I mean, let's give you an example. So for cost of sales, to do my calculation, it would be Laurel's cost of sales. On the left-hand side, you can see that is 58,200. Plus Rakewood's cost of sales, which you can see is 34,000. So I could just type that into my my cell, and let's say that I have also calculated an unrealized profit of let's say that's 300, just making up numbers here. I could type everything into the cell there and press return, and I do get my cost of sales. And that's great in terms of doing the calculations, because it does save you having to open the calculator here. Remember, the calculator can be standard, it can be scientific, or as we've said, you can use your own. So that would save me having to open that calculator. But for your marker, it is really super useful to be able to see what is included in that number. So I would 100%, a real top tip here, show them. So just in brackets, 58,200 plus the 34,000, which was Rakewood, and then plus we said there was an unrealized profit of 300, and I would actually use URP just to identify what that is, so the marker knows exactly what is going on. So the calculation is embedded here within the cell, and the marker can look at that. However, I would like to make their life much easier. I would also like to be able to write URP to tell them exactly what that 300 is, just in case I've got the wrong number, so they know that I've made the right adjustment even though it's the wrong number. So I'm going to show this working in brackets. So I would say that is the best way to do that. Now, if we jump on to our very last section C question, which is, of course, an analysis question there. You can see comment on performance, gearing, calculation of some ratios. Then what we have here is we have a word function. We have a word processor function to operate in. Now, something that's really important is to lead your marker through your answer. So this is a great place to show you another top tip, which is to copy and then paste my requirement into my solution. And what that does is it indicates to the marker what answer they are marking, or what part of the answer they are marking. So of course I've just done that for C, but I can also do it for B and A, and then flesh out the answer under each of those requirements, under each of those headings. Saves time, you don't have to actually type out a heading. So just to summarise, my main top tips here are to, first of all, now read the instructions, but then as you do mocks, as you go into your actual exam, use the navigation tools to your advantage. Use the scratch pad to keep a track of time. Use highlight and strike through tools if they are useful to you. And then in the longer questions, think about how you are using the cell functionality in the spreadsheet to do your calculations, but please help your marker by showing them what you're doing. And in written questions, use this cut and, or copy, I should say, and paste approach of the requirement, again, to lead your marker through your script.
Okay, hopefully you found that a useful little video. So talking, as I say, about software techniques. So really make sure you have a go at that and use it. But let's move on now and talk about my third topic, which was exam technique tips. So we've talked about technical content, we've talked about software usage. Now let's talk about technique, massively important. What would I say to you? Well, the first thing you have to do is really make sure you think about what the question means. So for example, if it says calculate, what it really means is only slightly different, but show me how you calculate something. So your question might be something like calculate some ratios. Well, make sure, and the examiner says this over and over again in examiners' reports, show how you calculate the ratio. Do not just give a final figure. Why is that? Because you get own figure rule marks. You get working marks. If you don't show your workings, you can't get any marks. So please, please, whether it's a goodwill calculation, whether it's an unrealized profit, whether it's a ratio, show your marker how you have calculated. And of course, that is in the section C questions. It's not relevant to section A and B. You might have an explain question. What does that really mean? It means explain step by step in simple terms. It's really easy to jump to the conclusion and so not explain in full and therefore miss marks. So for example, and these are all real exam questions that I've just taken these extracts from, explain whether or not the disposal of silver is likely to constitute a discontinued operation and the correct accounting treatment. So it's easy to just say, yeah, it's discontinued, here's what you do. But you've missed a load of marks there. What you should be doing is going step by step. What is a discontinued operation? Let's apply the definition to silver. Now let's give the accounting treatment. So you've just taken baby steps there to get to your conclusion. That's how you access the marks. Obviously be driven by the number of marks for the requirement. Last, very, very common, this one, analyze. So we see this, of course, in section C a lot. What does that mean? Basically, it means say what's happened, but say why it's happened. Say whether you can link it. Say what it means for the future. So you've really got to push on that factual kind of statement really of what has happened. You've got to do the analysis side of things. So a typical question might be, there you go, analyze the performance and position for the Pinardi Group compared to last year. So what I'd be looking for to answer that, I think this is a good approach, is what I call the fact and ELF approach. So you state a fact, but then you don't stop. So it might be revenues increased by 2%. That's your fact. That will score you nothing because you are not adding any value. You're not even saying, that's great, it's improved. You're just saying it's increased by 2%. To access your marks, you need to be explaining why it's happened. So use the scenario to do that. Don't just make it up. Don't just use textbook explanations. If in the scenario it says there's a new customer, mention that. If it says there's a new product, mention that. Use the facts you've been given. So explain the fact. L stands for link. Link it if you can. So for example, the revenues increased by 2% and therefore it's not surprising that debtors has also increased, or receivables I should say, by 2%. F stands for future. See if you can add something about the future, again using the facts in the question. So revenues increased by 2%, probably because we've got a new customer that's been mentioned. That means receivables has also increased. And actually in the future, this customer's only made orders at the end of the year. So in the future, we'd expect to see revenue increase again when we've got a full year of orders from the customer. That's the kind of thing that is analysis. Fact, and then push it onwards. Okay, so first thing there, as I say, think about what the question really means and make sure you answer that. Secondly, think about those longer questions, the section C questions. Now, whilst I showed that video, I dipped really quickly into the questions that have been coming in. I managed to rattle off a couple of very quick answers. But one of the questions coming from a few people was section C. I'm a little bit worried about this. I don't really know how to approach these questions. So first of all, those two questions, one of them is going to be accounts preparation. In other words, you are producing an SPL, a soft P, probably not both really, might be a consolidated version, but you are producing accounts. The second question is analysis. That's the chatty question that we've just spoken about. Revenues increased, here's why, etc. So taking each of those in turn, what might your approach be? Accounts prep, first of all, you could be preparing a single company's accounts. So something like the example on the screen there. It's a three-part question. This one was prepare a schedule of adjusted profit, prepare the SOCI, the statement of changes in equity, prepare the SOFP, the statement of financial position. What would I do to approach this question? I would first of all set up pro formas in your constructed response area. And somebody asked, do we need to learn those? Are we given them? You need to learn them. So set up those pro formas, then get some really easy marks by feeding the trial balance information. So you'll tend to be given a trial balance, feed the balances across into your pro formas. So if you're pretty confident something's not going to be adjusted, you can put it in as a final figure. If you think the trial balance figure is going to be adjusted when you look at the extra information, bracket it in a working, but get it into your pro formas. Then look at the additional points in the question. They all need dealing with. You need to post entries. You need to account for whatever they're telling you about. It might be depreciation. It might be a financial instrument. You need to account for them. So to deal with those, take the order easiest first. Grab your easy marks. So you might be doing point number 4 first, then going to point number 2, then point number 5. Doesn't matter. So deal with those. Do any workings as a separate item, a separate working, and reference them to the face of your soft P, your SPL, whatever it is, and then feed the number back up. And then step number 4, complete the pro formas, but don't get too upset about that, because actually, in terms of how many marks are going for getting the final numbers, you can get all the marks just by having the workings. If you've got all the workings right, you can get the marks. The only thing you have to be careful about is a question such as the one on the screen there. Part A is to come up with an adjusted profit. Part C is to prepare a soft P. Well, to finalise the soft P, you do need to take that adjusted profit figure, so you would have to complete Part A. But of course, that's not a full SPL, it's just an adjustment to profit. So that's a single company accounts prep question. The other type of accounts prep question is a consolidation. So something like what we've got on the screen there, prepare the C soft P for pedantic, and then a little add-on, which is an explanation, a wordy requirement. So something like that, I'd probably get the wordy bit out of the way first, allocate your time, get it out of the way, and then crack on with part A. I think if you do part A first, it's easy to lose track of time and never quite get round to part B. In terms of part A, though, in terms of preparing the accounts, similar approach to previously. Number 1, set up your pro formas. If you are doing, and you're not in that question I've given you as an example, but if you're doing a statement of profit or loss, remember the little add-on, which is the allocation of profit between the owners of the parent and the NCI, because too many students forget that little add-on because it's not in the individual company SPLs, and they use those to drive the consolidated format. So you forget that very easily, but by goodness, there are a lot of marks down there mostly. So please remember it. Once you've set up your pro formas, get the easy marks by bracketing parent revenue plus subs revenue, or parents non-current assets plus subs non-current assets, and so on. Some really easy marks there. Then again, next step, deal with those additional points. And as you deal with them easiest first, use workings and reference the workings. So a very similar methodology. Then complete the pro formas. And again, not many marks going for the completion. It's the workings where you're getting the marks. Okay, accounts prep, and then we've got analysis questions. What's a good approach to analysis questions? So something like the one on the screen there. Calculate some ratios is part A, and then analyze the performance and position of treats in part B. So what would I do here? Well, first of all, I'd calculate the ratios because A, most people are more comfortable with the calculation, so it's good to get them done first. But B, in order to do the analysis, to have the discussion, you need to have calculated the ratios. So get those done first. Then my second step there is go to your word processor document and set up a skeleton answer. So the marker is looking for some nice headings, some nice structure to your answer here. So in the question I've gotten as example, analyze performance and position. So I want to see a heading performance and a heading position. I would then add subheadings. So under performance, for example, depending on the ratios you've calculated, let's say there was a ROCE or gross profit margin, an operating profit margin, have a heading for each of those. Don't forget, it doesn't only have to be ratios that you can talk about. You could just have a heading for revenue because you feel there's something to mention there, something to discuss. Do the same for position. So if you've calculated a current ratio, that goes under position. If you've calculated gearing, that goes under position. So you've got a really nice skeleton with lots of things that you know you're going to write about. Next step, flesh it out. When you flesh it out, this is where you're taking the approach of state the fact and then go into the explanation. Really importantly, at step number 4 though, because we know there's a mark going for this, add a conclusion to that skeleton and then populate it. And it doesn't really matter what your conclusion is saying as long as it's reflecting what you've written above. So it's just a really abbreviated version of what you've already said. And that's a nice, easy mark. So don't forget that. So some really good approaches there. So try and put those into practice. And that's what I'm going to suggest that you do as my final really part of this session. My final tip is to practice. Practice using your technical content, revising your technical content, practice using the exam software, practice good exam technique. And actually, if you do questions in the practice platform, if you work through the mocks in the practice platform, you can tick off all of those things because the practice platform mocks are in the software, they require you to use technique, and they require you to know some technical knowledge. And if you do something and you think, oh, I didn't know that, then you can add it to your notes. So in terms of my next little chat, I'm kind of continuing, I suppose. It's a separate subsection, which is using mock exams, but of course it's continuing from what we've just said. When you're doing these mock exams in your run up now to your final exam, what do I think you should be doing? Well, I've chunked this down really into before, during, and after. So before you sit a mock exam, first of all, and I mentioned this in the video, read through those software instructions, make sure you're up to speed with the functionality. Remember, you can just go into the practice platform and just have a play with the software. You don't have to open an exam. You can go to a blank response area and just have a play. And that's absolutely fine. So make sure that you're in a position where, yep, I'm okay. I can have a go. I know what's there. I know how to use it. Give yourself time and space. So if you live with family or friends, just tell them you need 3 hours, you need a block of time, no interruptions, and make sure you have no interruptions. Leave your phone in another room and actually sit the exam as if it were the real thing. And finally there, think about the order of the exam. There's a section A, a section B, a section C. How you do your exam is entirely up to you. So have a go at a few different ways, see what suits you best. So use your mocks to decide that. And once you've decided, do another mock in that order just to confirm you're happy. So some people do like section C first, some people do like section A. It's personal. When you're in the exam, so in your mock exam, but also in your real exam, first and by far the most important thing that I will go on and on and on about is time management. So you know you have 1.8 minutes per mark, so 54 minutes for section A, 54 for section B, and then 2 blocks of 36 minutes in section C. You must stick to time. You must move on when time is up. The idea is to have a go at every single question. You need 50% to pass. It is much harder to get 50% of an exam correct if you've only sat 50% of it in the first place, because you have to get everything right. Whereas if you've had a stab at everything, at every question, you only need to get half of each question right to pass. And that's a much easier approach. So time management and make sure you do everything. In the mock exam, think about the exam technique I've spoken about and try and employ it. Think about using your software efficiently. Excuse me, and try and employ that as well. We've talked about those things previously. What we've not talked about, though, is what to do after the exam, because actually that's just as important. So self-mark. Watch debrief videos. There's a brand new mock available on the practice platform. There are debrief videos on ACCA's YouTube channel to accompany those. Use them, learn from them. Note down what you have learned. And if you do that, it means that you're in this wonderful cycle of practicing exams, debriefing, marking, reading the examiner's report, reading the answer, but then learning from that and feeding it back into your knowledge. And so you're in this continuous improvement cycle, and it will get better and better and better in the next 3 weeks up to your exam. So then the aim in moving from your practice mocks to your real exam is to use this series of building blocks to achieve your pass. So keep calm. the more you've practiced, the calmer you can be. You're not going to be anxious. Stick to your exam plan, whether that's section A, section B, whatever it may be first. Allocate your time. Stick to your time. Those two things go hand in hand. Attempt all questions. Read the question and answer the question. So don't answer the question you wish it were. Answer the question the examiner's actually asked you. Remember your good answer technique. And if you use all of those building blocks, you're in a great position to secure your pass. So lots and lots of top tips there. I know it seems like there's a lot being thrown at you, but the more mocks you can do to practice all of that, the better. And as I say, a few people have said I'm a little bit anxious in the Q's and A's box. I think this is your way to get over that, to just keep practicing and using these tips. So I hope that's helped. What I want to do now, though, is just move on to some very, very common questions that we are asked so that we can then launch into the live questions at the end. But I think we'll have covered off some of those actually by going through these most asked questions. So I've got a few going to pop up here. First of all, should I show workings for section A and B questions? No, absolutely not. Section A and section B are marked by the computer. The computer has no interest in your workings. The computer does not get to see your workings. So if you want to do workings, they are for you only. So that's really important. In OTQs that require two options, so pick two of the following 5 options, for example. Will I fail the question if I get one wrong? Yes, you will. OTQs are all or nothing. So if you choose 2 options and you get them both right, you have 2 marks. If you choose 2 options and one is wrong, you have 0 marks. If you only choose one option, you have absolutely no way of getting 2 marks. So always choose 2. How different is the real exam to the mock? Well, there are kind of 2 things to say here. First of all, in terms of the structure, it is the same. There is a section A, there is a section B, there is a section C. They have the same mark allocation as your real exam. The mock exam is structured to replicate your real exam. In terms of technical content, there might be overlap, there might not be overlap. The examining team set the real exam 1.5, 2 years in advance. So setting a mock after a period of time does not mean it is going to have the same items, the same topics on it. So do not think when you sit the mock, oh, I can't remember what's on it, but don't think, oh, there's a consolidated soft-P. That means there will definitely be one on my real exam, because that is not the case. So just be very, very careful with that. Are formulae provided for ratio calculations? No, they're not. You have to learn the formulae. Very, very occasionally, the examiner will give you a formula. Often it's something like gearing, because there's more than one way of calculating gearing, and he just wants to clarify how he'd like you to calculate it. But generally speaking, you do have to learn those, I'm afraid. What's the difference between accounts prep and analysis questions? I think we've probably covered that off, but accounts prep is where you are actually preparing a financial statement. Analysis is where you are given financial statements and you have to write about them. You have to, in effect, pull them apart. A few more questions here. The first one, what technical topics will be covered in each section? And I've just taken a little extract here from one of I think it's from the syllabus actually, rather than an examiner's report. The 20-mark questions will examine the interpretation, so we've called that analysis, and preparation, we've called that accounts prep, of financial statements for a single entity or a group. Section A and Section B can cover any area of the syllabus. So please don't cherry pick what you're going to learn, because Section A and Section B, they really could cover anything. And very often they will cover kind of slightly more detail. There might be, for example, 3 OTQs in a Section B question on, let's say, government grants. And so the examiner can really get down into some detail on that particular topic. So yeah, as I say, just coverage of everything is really at a relatively high level, but it's going to really help you there. Do I lose marks for spelling mistakes? No, you don't. All that we really need, and this of course is probably in an analysis question, all that we really need is for the marker to actually understand what you're saying. but they will not penalise you for spelling something incorrectly. Do you have to learn the numbers and the names of the standards? No, you don't. You will not be given any credit, for example, for just throwing in the name of a standard or its number into your analysis question or into an explanation. Just throwing in the name will not get you any credit. The name and number might be mentioned in a question, so in accordance with IAS 38 intangible assets, explain the accounting treatment for, say, 3 marks or something on the end of a consolidation question or the end of an accounts prep question. But the number and the title will be given. So it's not like you have to remember what the number means. So don't worry about that, really would be my message. Is the level of exam questions the same as questions in the study hub? Well, in the study hub, there are kind of 2 different types of questions, longer questions. There's the longer questions, which are single discipline, which just help you understand material in the chapters. And then there are the revision questions, which are multidisciplinary. It's those revision questions that are multidisciplinary, which are the ones which are going to be the same level as exam questions. So just be quite discerning about which ones you pick to do at this stage. And then finally, is working through the study hub questions enough to pass? I'd say only if you supplement it with what's on the practice platform, because the practice platform has all of those, the mocks. It also has the hybrid real exams. So the examiner will take, for example, this March and June sittings and select questions which go onto the practice platform of a hybrid. So never the section A and section B there, but section C 2 questions. So use those hybrid real exams as well. If you work what's on the practice platform and you work the study hub questions, then I think that's enough to pass. That's what all of that material is designed to support you in. So those are my frequently asked questions. There were quite a lot of them. I think we've probably covered quite a lot off. But if we just launch into the live Q&As now, and this is where I just have to pull up the Q&As that you've all been sending in and pick some. So let me pull up what has come in. And I'm just going to try and pick, as I say, the more general ones. Will we have cash flow related questions in section C? Yes, you could do. Probably not a full cash flow statement, but extracts could come up. So investing activities and financing activities, for example. So yes. If I manage to show workings in section C, but not the full solution, do I get any marks? Yes, you absolutely do. So if I just give you an example, something like an unrealized profit in a consolidation question, you might drop into a working to do that unrealized profit calculation. And then in an ideal world, you will feed that figure up into, let's say, deduct it from inventory if you were doing a soft P, deduct it from retained earnings if P is the seller. So if you imagine in a kind of roundabout sense, there's a mark for the calculation and then half a mark for each of the adjustments. If you only do the working, you've got a mark. If you feed it into one of the places correctly, you've got another half mark. If you feed it into the second place correctly, that's another half mark. So they're like building blocks here. So the working is the start of the first building block, let's call it. This is a great time for me to mention, though, that if you get the working wrong and you have the wrong number, you would lose that mark, but you would still get half a mark for putting that wrong unrealized profit figure into, or out of, I should say, inventory and out of retained earnings. So if you do the right thing with the wrong number, you can access marks. That's what we call own figure rule. You are using your own figure, which is wrong, but you're doing the right thing with it, so you get marks. Does an analysis question, will analysis be included, I think that is, in accounts prep? No. They're 2 completely distinct questions. Now, the analysis question could be analysis of a single company or analysis of a group scenario. So you could be presented with single company financial statements to analyze or consolidated financial statements to analyze. The other question is accounts prep. And again, can be single entity or consolidation, but one will be consolidation, one will be single company. So you won't have a consolidated analysis and a consolidated prep or single company both. You'd have a group and a single company. Let's just keep on going through. Tips to score in section A and B. Do you know what? For section A and B, I honestly think the more practice, the better for those. So just practice, practice, practice. And as I said earlier, go into those examiners' reports and use the real exam questions, because that's where you can access them. It's the only place you can access them. Use the real questions from exams, have a go at them to time without looking at the answer, and then go back and look at what the examiner said. And the examiner takes you through what you should have done, what technical topic it tests, what people did wrong primarily, so you can see where others are making mistakes. So that's my top tip. My other top tip with section A and B is absolutely to do the easiest questions first and then go back and fill in with those harder questions. So use the software to help you navigate throughout that. Let's just see if we can find up for workings in section C. This is a common question. Using the formulae, the examiner can access the workings by clicking on the answer. You're absolutely right. Should you still display your working? The examiner can, or your marker can, click on the cell and see whatever calculation you've done behind it in the text box at the top of the spreadsheet. I think you should show separately your working. And actually, if you look at the latest examiner's report, he's included an extract from a spreadsheet to illustrate exactly that point. So a bracketed working, even if you've got exactly the same typed in to your Excel formula, your cell. So then you're using your cell, your formula to do the calculation, but you're still showing. Please show that. Important chapters for section A and B. Absolutely anything could be examined in sections A and B. Literally anything. So as I say, please don't cherry pick the topics that you are going to look at. One thing that I'll just mention as well, because it's relevant, if your analysis question in section C is on consolidation, on consolidated financial statements, very often we see some questions creep into the OTQs which are more consolidation calculations. So be prepared for that. Don't expect there to be no consolidation in section A and B, because there could well be. How do we have to present section C answers? Working first, then answer, or vice versa? Doesn't matter. Absolutely doesn't matter. Your marker will navigate your answer. Try and make it easy for them by signposting. So if you're doing workings first, have a heading workings, so they know what they're dealing with. But if you do workings first, that's fine. They'll scroll down and see your financial statement or whatever it may be. So don't worry about that. So I've had a question about associates and upstream and downstream transactions. And this particularly, I think this is the question I read before, but particularly there was a question about, I've looked at previous editions of learning materials and there seem to be slightly different approaches. Well, what's happened with upstream and downstream transactions is that recently the examiner has decided that you have to get the entries correct. You have to distinguish between upstream and downstream. Historically, the examiner was really quite relaxed on giving marks on upstream and downstream transactions. Let's not distinguish between the two. But now you have to distinguish between the two. So the best way to think about this is think who is selling to who, which company is making the profit, which company has the inventory, and let that drive your elimination journal. So if the associate has got the inventory now and the parent made the sale, then the parent's got the profit. You need to adjust the parent's cost of sales to get rid of that profit. The associate has the inventory, but wait a minute, we can't adjust the associate's inventory because we don't have the associate's inventory in consolidated inventory. Instead, we've got a one-line entry, investment in associate, so you adjust that. If it's the other way around, if the associate is selling to the parent holds the inventory, the associate has made the profit. If the associate's made the profit, we need to get the ERP, the unrealized profit, out of the associate's profit in that share of profit of associate line. If the parent's holding the inventory, we need to get the ERP out of inventory in the inventory line in the soft P. So just take the step back and think which company's done which thing. And that will help with your adjustment, but we do have to distinguish between upstream and downstream. And don't forget, only take the group share of that unrealized profit as well. That's easily forgotten. So Scanning down, are there any marks if the soft P balances in effect? No, absolutely not. There's no marks for even adding up to get to your total assets and your total liabilities, so don't worry about that at all. And in fact, it can be quite disconcerting if you do the additions and your soft P does not balance. So in some respects, I would say don't bother, don't put yourself through that, because you don't get any marks for it anyway. Just scrolling down, what would be the ideal team to be allotted to section C? Section C is 2 20-mark questions. Take them as 2 separate things. Each 20-mark question is 36 minutes. Spend 36 minutes, stop and move on. You will always get more marks from moving on to a new question and getting the easy marks at the start of that question, rather than dragging out the previous question and trying to get the harder marks, which take longer to get. So 36 minutes, stop and move on. Let me just scroll down and see what else we've got. There's lots of questions about which parts of the syllabus are going to be tested for A and B, so I'm just going to reiterate absolutely anything could come up there. Do I have to draw up the pro formas, or is it drawn already? You have to draw up those pro formas, but actually, use the question. This is, of course, section C. Use the question to drive how you draw them up. So if it's a single company accounts prep question, you have a TB. Look at the items in that TB, and they will help you drive what's in your actual statement. If you're doing a consolidation, you have separate company, SOFP or SPL, whichever it is. Use that format to drive your pro forma. The only thing I would say with that approach is make sure you leave space. Don't write it all down, your pro forma all tight, because then you can't squeeze in extra things that you might have forgotten, like goodwill, for example, or an adjustment in a single company accounts question. So lots of space, 2 lines or so maybe in between each entry that you make. The marker doesn't mind there being space. They would rather there was space than not space. It's much easier to mark. Section C, long questions. Do they have 2 parts or 1 part? It could be anything. It could be 3 parts. We've seen an example with 3 parts today. So you just need to be flexible. If it is 1 part for 20 marks, it appears daunting. In that case, in your head, try and break it down into separate parts. So it might be analyze the position and performance. Okay, position 10 marks, performance 10 marks. Just try and chunk it down. It makes it much more achievable. It's a psychological thing. 2 papers to cover. Can I pass? Can I do it? Yeah, you've got 2 papers upcoming. Get yourself a plan in place would be my top tip. So make sure you allocate time to both of those subjects. It's easy to just really concentrate on the one that you prefer, perhaps. So get yourself a plan in place for a revision schedule, really, for both papers, and stick to it, and make sure that you include in that revision plan lots and lots of practice, not just sitting and learning and writing out notes. I've said that's great, so you've got a revision source, but ultimately practice is what will take you to your path here. I think we've only got 2 minutes to go, so I'm thinking I should probably bring Isabel back in now, in case there's anything that needs to be added from an ACCA perspective. And I think I'm a bit out of breath, actually.
No, you've done an amazing job. Thank you so much, Cara. I think it's been a really useful session, but you're right, we are running out of time, so we'll probably have to wrap up now. The only thing I'll add is just to remind everyone, because you've registered for this webinar, you will be getting an email with details of how you can watch it again on demand. So don't worry, like I said at the beginning, if you've missed anything or you had any tech issues, don't worry, you can revisit this and watch again after this. So I think all that's left to be said is a huge thank you to our expert tutor, Cara, and she did do an amazing job getting through so many of your questions, and I know that will be very useful to you all. And thank you to the rest of the ACCA team who've been helping out in the back end as well, and of course to everyone for your participation on behalf of ACCA, and we really do wish you best of luck with your exams. So take care.
Good luck
And goodbye.